Pennywise the Killer Clown is back in It Chapter 2, which now sees the kids from the Losers Club return back to Derry as adults to end things once and for all. Now, if you've already read the book or seen the miniseries, then It Chapter 2 won't be of any surprise to you, as the movie itself pretty much follows the exact same plot with some small changes. So based on that alone, your enjoyment of Chapter 2 will depend a lot if you enjoyed or liked the adult portion of the original It two-parter story. I myself, for some reason, always preferred it over the first part when the Loser Club were kids, at least in the miniseries. So going into It Chapter 2, I already had my expectations set, and for the most part, they were pretty spot on. Granted, there were some changes thrown in which the movie could have done with or without, but they don't really change the outcome of anything. For example, like adding the whole native Indian element to the backstory of the It creature and how to defeat it, or the way the movie ends, which is an interesting take to say the least, but I definitely prefer the miniseries over the movie in this respect. Although despite those said changes and a few others, the story is pretty much the same. Kids come back to Derry as adults, some do end up dying, and the resolution is the same, just done a little bit differently. However, with that said, I know that not everyone has read the book or seen the miniseries, so they're not familiar with how the story plays out and merely are just curious how good the movie is. And in terms of the horror perspective, I'd say Chapter 1 is better, in the sense that it is both the characters and the audience's first experience dealing with the It creature. Because obviously something is of course going to be more creepier the first time around, and it stays true here. The Losers Club as adults know what to expect of Pennywise, and while they show some fear, they aren't anywhere near as afraid of it as they were as kids. Well, at least most of them aren't. And the same goes for us the viewer. We've already experienced the craziness and weirdness of Pennywise, his mannerisms, his faces, his different forms, and so on. So it's not as scary because of that, and if anything, he kind of does less scarier and creepier things in Chapter 2. Not to mention, a lot of the scare scenes here are a bit more goofy than before, so that might not be everyone's cup of tea. And speaking on that, a few things that I didn't like of Chapter 2 was the excessive use of jump scares. As while Chapter 1 had a decent amount of them, they're always so ever present in Chapter 2 to the point it does get pretty predictable. And because of all these jump scares, these scary scenes themselves don't last too long and you miss out on a lot of that much needed tension. In Chapter 2, I can only think of 2 scary long scenes of Pennywise that have a lot of tension in them. And one of them is the old woman scene from the trailer, so a lot of people are gonna know what to expect of that one. Another thing that Chapter 2 could have done without was using less of the child actors, as there's a lot of flashback scenes in which are randomly cut from the present time to the past, and then abruptly back to the present with the adult actors. It's kind of jarring and puts more focus on the kid actors, which in my opinion really takes away from the performance of the adults. And that's just it. This movie is about them and their journey. We've already seen the kid story before, so why not have us enjoy this for what it is? Now, I'm fine with a few flashbacks here and there with the kid actors, but this movie really overdoes it to the point it feels shoehorned and forced. And as if the studio or director weren't confident that the movie would be good without the kids that made the first one so well done. Really, at some points I felt like I was watching Chapter 1 all over again instead of Chapter 2. Which hey, that movie was good and all, but I didn't go to the theater to watch Chapter 1, you know what I mean? Overall, It Chapter 2 is admittedly less scarier than the first one, and that's both for reasons it has and hasn't control over. The acting itself is good and the story is interesting, especially if you've never experienced it before. But the over-reliance on the kid actors and the excessive use of jump scares does hurt it a lot in the long run. With that said, the movie is worth a look as there's still plenty of fun to be had despite its flaws. But that's my take on It Chapter 2. I hope you found it enjoyable and informative, and if you saw the movie, do let me know in the comments down below if you liked it, hated it, or were somewhere in between, as I'm always interested to hear what you all have to say. As always, I'll see you guys on the next one.